Hello everybody, we are back and we have part 2 of our lecture on mindset theory. Alright, get myself set up and let's see, got our presentation, everybody's happy, and here we go. So this is part 2, and this is on mindset theory. You watched 3 videos. You've digested them a little bit. You've answered some questions. You did your blog where you had 8 questions. And now we are going to kind of go through the theory. We'll go through those questions, and we'll see what the takeaway is. All right. So, mindset theory. I'm going to actually take this out and talk a little bit about what's going on here philosophically. There's a lot of issues that are in the background that you're going to know about now. So, there's a big question in philosophy about whether or not virtues are learned or if they're innate, right? We're studying virtue ethics, right? Virtue ethics. And we know that in virtue ethics, we have a principle of character, right? Principle of character. When we're talking about moral goodness, it applies to people. And it applies to what makes them who they are. And what makes people who they are is the characteristics that is their makeup. And to have good characteristics, to be a good person, is moral goodness in virtue ethics. So, who you are, is that something you learned in your life? You were taught to be who you are? Or is it something innate? Something that has to do with the makeup of who you are. When you were born, you had a genetic makeup, and does that determine who you are as a person? So this is a big debate. Are virtues learned or innate? And that's going to play a big role in mindset theory and has a lot of implications in virtue ethics. Okay, so it's actually an unresolved debate. We don't have an answer definitively which it is. Is it nature, right? Innate. We're just born a certain way. That's our nature. Or is it nurture? Is it what we're taught? Is it our experiences that make us who we are? Does this matter? Yes, it does. We're going to learn about why it matters in this second part of this lecture. Okay, so we may have a new word here, innate, which means existing in one from birth, and that's one side, one possibility, right? Who we are, something that just is part of who we are from birth. Okay, let's move on. You had an online test today, right? Do you have a growth or fixed mindset? And so I asked you a bunch of questions and sort of asked you, like, do you think intelligence is something that changes during your life, or is it something that is sort of fixed? You're this smart, and that's who you are. That's sort of the way things just happened. All right, so at the end of the quiz, you add up your points, and then you see that there are 3 different ranges that you could have landed in. 60 to 90 points, 90 to 120, or 120 to 150. There was no wrong answer to this quiz, so wherever you happen to be, if you're 60 points, that doesn't mean you're any better or worse than someone who had 150 points. It has nothing to do how many points you have with anything about winning or who you are. It's actually trying to figure out what sort of mindset you might have been operating with when you took the test. So if you were in the 60 to 90 point range, this generally is considered the area where you were taking this test and you had sort of a fixed mindset. And we'll talk about what that is. If you were in the 120 to 150 point range, then when you took the quiz, you were operating with sort of a growth mindset. Now, usually, I get a lot of students in the middle, in the 90 to 120 point. What does that mean? That means that you kind of were susceptible to lean in either direction. You could easily be pushed to a fixed mindset or a growth mindset when you're in that middle area. Okay, so what are these mindsets? Let's actually go to the person who came up with this theory. Not by herself. She worked with lots of other psychologists. Most of her papers are co-written. Okay, so self-perception is something that Carol Dweck, who gives us this whole theory of mindsets, is sort of a lead researcher, professor of psychology at Stanford University, who writes about and does experiments studying self-perception, how we perceive ourselves, who we are. And she's come up with a theory of self-perception. How we perceive the nature of ourself has important consequences. Right? So a theory of self-perception, that depending on how we perceive ourselves, there's a relationship between that and something else. We'll talk about what those consequences are. So there's an important concept, the self-concept. And this is an idea about the self, or an idea about the characteristics that make up the self. And this is what the test was looking at, what sort of self-concept we have about ourselves. We may not even realize that we see ourselves in this way. Right? It may be something operating beneath the surface. We've never articulated it. We may have thought about it. It's the self-concept. So let's continue to the next slide. All right, so what are these self-concepts? Well, before we get there, I'm going to give you another word, mindset. The word mindset was not originally a part of Professor Dweck's lexicon, the words she used in her research, but as she wrote more and she started to write books for the general public instead of articles for psychology journals, she came up with the word mindset and it stuck. People connected to it. And so self-concept in her early work has sort of made its way to the word mindset, which is found in many of her best-selling books that lots of different people around the country are reading. So we'll talk about a theory of mindsets for the rest of this lecture. And she has two different mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And so here we have two just basic definitions. A fixed mindset, the qualities that define who we are as a person are fixed and do not dramatically change. All right, that's the fixed mindset. So you might have a certain amount of athletic ability, and it doesn't change that much. Some people are very athletic and some people aren't. And part of life is sort of discovering what talents and skills you have. Okay, so that's the fixed mindset. Now we can go to the growth mindset, the qualities that define who we are as a person can change and can change dramatically. Right? Qualities, this is another word for characteristics. And the growth mindset sees those characteristics as parts of you that can change and can change dramatically. So big changes. With the fixed mindset, there's some room for change, but not that much. In the growth mindset, you can radically change. So you might be the worst basketball player in the world. If you have a growth mindset, then you see that ability as something that over time, not all at once, could be completely flipped around. You could become a star basketball player. Dramatic change. So I haven't said how that change happens, but with a growth mindset, you believe that change can happen. Whereas with a fixed mindset, you either have amazing basketball talent or you don't. So one's about talent you just have or you don't, and growth mindset is about skills that you can develop. Okay. So these are just two ways that we can look at ourselves. When we watch the video by Carol Dweck, where she's speaking at Stanford and she's talking about her research, there was quite a bit in there, and I wanted to go over the questions I gave you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that Dweck spoke about, and maybe I'll add some more in. Okay, so the questions. You had 6 questions. We've already got some answers, right? The first 2, what is growth mindset? What is fixed mindset? Well, I just gave you some definitions, right here. Fixed mindset, the qualities that define who we are as a person are fixed and do not dramatically change. Growth mindset, the qualities that define who we are as a person can change and can change dramatically. So both these definitions are about the qualities that define us as people. Sometimes when students try to define growth and fixed mindset, they talk a lot about the consequences of holding these mindsets instead of what the mindset itself is about. So with a fixed mindset, someone might say, well, a fixed mindset is when you see a challenge as a test of whether or not you have a quality. And that's not actually the definition of fixed mindset. That's more a consequence of holding the mindset, is that you see challenges in a certain way as a test. So we want to be careful when we're defining the fixed and growth mindset, that it's about what it's about. It's about a self-concept, right? How we view the qualities that make up, constitute who we are. All right, so those are questions 2 and 3. Then in the talk, Dr. Dweck talks about the tyranny of the now and the power of not yet. And these two map to the different mindsets. The tyranny of the now is the fixed mindset. And what is it? Well, in a fixed mindset, every moment in which you feel challenged, it's a test of whether or not you have or don't have that quality. So if you're in a philosophy class and it's hard, well, you're finding something out about yourself that's permanent. And that's kind of scary. That's the tyranny part of the now, is that every moment, whenever you're being challenged, you're learning something about yourself, of whether or not you have something, whether or not you can do philosophy. And that's a lot of pressure, right? That means every moment is high stakes, and high stakes, high pressure, and that can be difficult, right? The other One is the power of not yet, and that one maps to the growth mindset, because the growth mindset says that you can develop every skill, character trait, aspect that makes you up. So it's not yet determined whether or not you'll be able to do something or how well you'll be able to do it. And that empowers someone. That's empowering because it means that if you practice, right, then you could get better at it and you eventually can accomplish whatever the goal is or practice that you're trying to accomplish. So having a growth mindset doesn't mean that you're always living in the moment, being tested right now. When you're being challenged and you don't do well, it just means that you are not yet able to accomplish that task at the level that you were expecting or that you want to be. And that empowers you to keep working at it. Okay, so the tyranny of the now and the fixed mindset and the power of not yet and the growth mindset. And Carol Dweck comes up with these. These are sort of conclusions that she sees in people's behavior and their thinking from tons and tons of tests with lots of people. And the people who take do these experiments don't always know really what's being tested. And that's the amazing thing about a lot of psychology experiments is if the person knows what is actually being studied, they often try to hide or try to shape what they look like. But if they have no idea, they think it's something else that's being tested, and they sort of allow their true thoughts and feelings to come out. Okay, so let's look at questions 6 and 7. And again, these two questions, two types of praise, map also to the growth and fixed mindset. And praise, how we praise someone is something you might not think of as that important. Praise is praise, but it turns out there's different kinds of praise. And depending on which kind of praise you offer, you can influence someone to have either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And I think that's pretty amazing that we are susceptible in that way. We could be controlled in that way through how someone praises us. Okay, so a trait praise, that's a praise of someone's characteristic. Wow, you did that. You're so intelligent. What does that do when we tell someone they're so intelligent? It tells them they have a certain trait. They either have it or they don't have it, and they have it. So this sort of praise pushes someone to have a fixed mindset. You either have it or you don't. And when you do it well, it confirms that you have that trait, and someone else outside of you even recognize that. Okay, what about a process praise? Here, instead of praising someone's intelligence, you praise the effort they put into getting something done, the strategies they try, the resilience they show. It's a part of the process. And this is going to push someone into the growth mindset, that the more effort and work we put into something, regardless of whether we do it well or fail, the more work we put into something, the more practice, the more training, the better we will get at it. So by praising the process, we don't have a thinking we either have it or we don't. We have a thinking, I just have to keep working at something and I will get better. Okay, so there's some pretty amazing stories, right, in that video about students like you who, when they were taught to have more of a growth mindset, things changed for them. They showed improvement. They showed more improvement than someone with a fixed mindset. And so Carol Dweck finds that in her work depending on how you perceive yourself, your self-concept, this mindset, will sometimes affect how well you perform in the long run, right? Not in the moment, but in the long run. Someone with a growth mindset will do better than someone who has a fixed mindset. And so this is pretty amazing conclusions to draw, and they are the conclusions we have to draw when we look at the different experiments that Carol Dweck has done and the data that came back. But it makes sense also to us, right? Just thinking about it, if you have a fixed mindset and you don't do well at something, you say, okay, this is just not my thing, and you stop doing it. Why would you continue to do something that you see as something you'll never be able to do well, or you'll never be able to do at all? So the fixed mindset, you often will quit and then search for something that you can do well, that comes easy to you, that isn't challenging. Because if it's challenging, then you're having difficulty. Whereas the person with the growth mindset says, well, I just have to work at it, they're not going to give up as quickly. In fact, they're going to keep at something, and that person who stays at something, keeps practicing it, is more likely to improve at it and show, in the long run, higher performance. Okay. So, my computer's making a buzzing noise. I don't know if this is being picked up on the recording. Hopefully not. I think it's a fan that's not happy. Okay, so performance in the long run seems to be tied to our mindset, and that's pretty incredible. And lots of people are interested in Carol Dweck's results, and one group are human resources around the country, right, that hire you. That so at some point you're going to finish high school, you're going to finish college, you're going to go try to capture your dream job, and you're going to have to take an interview for that. And they're going to try to figure out, what kind of person are you? Now, a business, when they hire you, unless it's contract work and part-time, if they're hiring you as an employee, then they're sort of investing in you. They plan to have you around for a while, and they want to pick someone who is going to grow and be a real asset to the company. It costs a lot of money to hire somebody. You have to pay for someone to go out and read all the applications, pay for someone to do the interviews. There's a whole human resources department. Then you have to train that person. There's a lot of investment by a business. They want to get the most for their money. If you look at what Carol Dweck is doing, her work, the employee that's going to pay off the most in the long run is going to be someone who has a growth mindset. So when you go into an interview, and this is something that I don't think everybody knows when they go into an interview, but many businesses around the country, and Carol Dweck spends a lot of time now giving talks around the country, and a lot of times she's giving talks to the largest corporations in the world about her research. They're trying to figure out this prospective employee, what sort of mindset do they have. So now what they're looking for. They might ask you in that interview, hey, say something positive about yourself. And they might be trying to figure out, are you going to do a trait praise or a process praise when you talk about yourself? And believe me, they know about this research, and they're looking for clues, signs to determine which candidate's going to pay off the best. Okay, so that's interesting. And this work also is very much geared towards students. And what's interesting is that Carol Dweck found that at certain points in your education, you sort of leap to harder material. And when that happens, we sort of get tested. Depending on what kind of mindset, we're going to react differently, right? We see challenge differently. So when we're in elementary school, the work is really, it's the basics, and everybody eventually gets the basics, but it takes some people longer than others. And they've found that on average, girls do better than boys in elementary school. And why might that be? Well, girls mature faster. We know that that's a fact of biology, that girls mature faster than boys. They're also socialized differently from birth, from before birth. So often in elementary school, girls are able to sit and listen and pay attention to the teacher better than the boys. This is on average, not everybody. And so they get it faster. And the teachers, Carol Dweck found, were giving a lot of trait praise to the girls. Oh, you're so smart. That's great. You're really great at that. So they got a lot of trait praise. The boys, on the other hand, who are less mature and maybe socialized to be more aggressive, more movement oriented, and they don't pay attention as well, and they mess up a lot in the beginning on the basics, and they get a lot of praise that's process praise. Well, keep trying. Try this again. Try it another way. Okay, just try to sit still again one more time. All this process praise could lead to more of a growth mindset. Now we come to the middle school. The middle school is the first time where you get some really truly challenging material, and it's challenging for boys, girls, everybody, especially in the sciences, the math and sciences, the STEM. And when you reach this new level, middle school, and you get this more challenging work, if you have a fixed mindset and you're facing challenges, you might think, oh, well, the other stuff I had the intelligence for, this I don't. I better go to something else in school where I could really shine. And so a lot of girls at the middle school level start to give up on math and science. Whereas the boys who had the growth mindset, who got all the process praise, they are just as challenged, it's just hard for them. They get just as many things wrong, and yet they don't give up because they're used to sort of not doing well and focusing more on trying again. And so they stay a little longer. And Carol Dweck thinks that this could possibly explain the huge discrepancy between men and women in math and science professions. That it goes back to middle school, and it goes back to the kind of praise you got in elementary school. She's found correlations. Okay, when's the next big transition? It's often from high school to college. And you get to college, all of a sudden you sort of got a lot of more independence, a lot of more freedom, and the classes are more difficult. What's going to happen? Are you going to have a fixed mindset, and do you drop the class? Do you give up? Do you drop out of school? It's too hard. Or do you have more of a growth mindset and say, okay, just keep working at it. I'll get better. The power of not yet. So it turns out it's really important in terms of accomplishments, performance, which mindset you have. And a lot of students drop out of school due to mindset. It's that's an issue, right? If it's just your mindset. And it's also an issue when certain groups of people are socialized to have a more fixed mindset and to tend to then drop out of school faster, especially if you're the first one from your family to go to school. It might feel like, oh, my family we didn't have it. And you get there, you're challenged, you might say, oh, I don't have it either. My family is, I just come from a group or a family that we're not college types, and that's very unfortunate. That's why Brigham Young and many schools have become a lot more concerned with students' mindsets. Okay, let's go on. So, a couple of things that we can note about mindset theory is first fluidity. Right, Carol Dweck has found that we change our mindset. We go from growth to fixed all the time, moment to moment, day to day, and there's many different factors that influence which mindset we happen to be operating with at any time. So it's very fluid, it changes. Next, mindset inconsistency. What does this mean? This means that we don't just hold a growth mindset and everything is growth. We often see some characteristics through growth mindset and other characteristics of who we are through fixed mindset. So we're not consistent in how we view the self. Next, mindset susceptibility. Right? She's found that she can manipulate pretty much anybody to have different mindsets. If you work hard enough, you can change how someone views their self. And in psychology, this is called priming. Right? They can show you something or tell you something, and it primes you for a certain mindset. You might show everybody an article about DNA and how this coding, these nucleotides, or I'm not sure what we call them, but are whatever it is that makes up our coding, our biological coding. That if you read an article about that, and you realize it's like programming, and all this other stuff, this RNA works with it, and it's the program, it's the blueprint for who you are, and making little changes will cause us to change. You become primed for the fixed mindset. On the other hand, when she gives some of her experimentees an article about exercise and how the mind can be exercised. It's like a muscle, and the more you work at it, the more connections you make, the stronger those connections become, the more they become facilitated to fire faster and whole networks of connections. And you begin to have a growth mindset, that the mind itself is like a muscle, and the more you work out, the stronger it gets. And so you can prime either way. And finally, mindset self-direction. Once you know about mindsets, we can actually influence our own concept of the self, or our self perception, and so we can choose to push ourselves to have a growth mindset, even if we find we lean towards a fixed mindset. We can try to change that, and we can make changes over time to which mindset we lean on. Okay, there are a lot of resources all over the internet, and about mindset theory. And here is an image from a website, bigchange.org, sort of looking at different things depending on which mindset you have, different things you might say. And that's what's amazing, is depending on which mindset you have, you see a different world, and you say different things, and you react differently in different ways to the same thing as somebody else. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this here for a second. You can take a look at some of these quotes, and we will move on now to the third video, which was Trevor Reagan. And So hopefully you enjoyed Carol Dweck's talk. And then from Trevor, you sort of got to the nuts and bolts of mindset theory. And I think he does a good job. And maybe you remember in that video, LeBron James shows up, and it's a quote where he's talking about mindset theory. And why is he talking about that? Well, he's a top athlete. You might say, oh, he's just naturally talented. That's not how he sees it. In fact, mindset theory is something that's really important to him. And he doesn't think that he's just got talent. He thinks it takes work. And this is what drives him when he practices, is that I can get better. I just have to keep training. I have to train ugly. Okay, so if you ever run into LeBron James, this is what you should talk to him about. Talk to him about mindset theory, and that you studied it in this class, and he'll be instantly, I bet, excited to talk to you about this, because I think it's it's part of his life philosophy. Okay, so let's look at the chart that Trevor gives us. And so we have on the top the growth mindset, the bottom the fixed mindset, and he tries to contrast these two different worlds. So on the left side, the beliefs and focus, they're directed in sort of opposing ways. So at the top, the growth mindset, there's this belief that skills are built, you can learn and grow. Where at the bottom, with the fixed mindset, skills are born, you can't learn and grow. Right? So that's a waste of time then if you can't learn or grow. You just are who you are. Life becomes just trying to figure out who you are. And then on the top, growth mindset, life becomes what can I become? What should I work on? So the focus then for growth mindset is getting better at things, whereas the focus for the fixed mindset is performance outcomes, not looking bad, right? If it's something that I have, then I should be able to do it well, and it shouldn't be that hard for me. It should look like it was no problem for me. And so a lot of what the fixed mindset gets caught up with is, did I do it well? And if I didn't, I look bad. And so you're very worried about how you look. On the other hand, growth mindset, it doesn't matter whether you did it or not. It's all a part of getting better at something. And so doing something poorly doesn't really say anything about who you are. It says more that if you stuck with it, that you're trying to get better at it. Okay, now on the other side of the dotted lines, we have sort of response, how the different mindsets respond to these four key ingredients or aspects of life. One is effort, right? Putting effort into something. That's the barbells. So if you have a growth mindset, then effort is something that's useful, right? Because if you're putting effort into something, then you're going to get something out of that. You're going to grow. Like if you go to the gym and you're going to lift weights, and you choose a weight amount that doesn't require much effort from you, then you really don't get any stronger from that workout. Right? If you pick up the 1 pound dumbbells and you do 20 reps, that's good. You're moving the joint, but you're not going to get any stronger. On the other hand, if you go there and you choose a high weight amount for yourself and you really struggle and you put a lot of effort into trying to do all the reps, maybe you don't even do them all, but you do as many as you could do, that's going to lead to growth. Right? So effort is useful. On the other hand, if you have a fixed mindset, if you see the qualities that make you up as a person as something that doesn't really change, then effort is not useful. right? Because it's not going to gain you anything. You're not going to change that much. So all this effort is a waste. And why waste yourself? So why put effort into things? All right, what about the mountain rage? That has to do with challenges, right? It's a challenge to try to climb up the steep slope of the mountain. And if you have a growth mindset, you embrace challenges and you keep at it, right? Because it's an opportunity to get better. So someone with a growth mindset is going to seek out challenging work, challenging classes, challenging jobs at work. They're not going to be afraid to have to do something that's going to be difficult because they see it as a way to get better. On the other hand, if you have a fixed mindset and something looks very challenging, you're probably going to try to avoid it, right? Because it's either something you can't do, or it could possibly expose you as someone who doesn't have that talent or skill, and you're afraid to be exposed as not having that. So you would avoid challenges, and you would see them as a threat. Okay, the X, that's failing, right? We fail all the time in life. But how we see those failures is going to be different depending on the mindset. So if you have a growth mindset, a failing doesn't say anything about who you are, right? What qualities you have or don't have. And in fact, if you failed, it means that it was hard. And it means as long as you stick with it, you could use that experience to get better, to learn, to grow. So a failure, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's just a part of growth. On the other hand, if you have a fixed mindset, then failure is something you try to avoid at all costs, right? So, excuse me. So you dislike failure, and it tells you something about yourself. This is not something I can do. You don't get anything out of failures beyond don't try that again. All right, and the last one, we have those little word bubbles, and this is about commentary, right? People always are commenting back to us. Teachers are always commenting to you about your work, right? How do you view those comments when you get them? If you have a fixed mindset, then the comments, whether they're critical or constructive, don't really help because you are who you are. It's not going to change anything. So you really are not interested in feedback when you have a fixed mindset. And you often take any feedback you get as personal, as about who you are as a person. Because it either is someone commenting that you have or don't have a particular skill or quality. Right? So it becomes very personal. On the other hand, if you have a growth mindset and you get feedback, it doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. It's something that could be useful for getting better. So you see feedback as a tool. You don't take it personally, and you see if you can use it in your journey of self-improvement. So, okay. So I think this is pretty important and interesting research. Different mindset, what mindset we carry will affect a lot of different aspects of our life. All right, so we're coming to the end. Has some closing thoughts, and I want to connect this to a couple of, at least one other thing. Okay, so first, a truth question. So which mindset or self-concept actually lines up with reality? And the answer is there is no definitive answer, right? That nature-nurture debate is ongoing. We don't know how much of who you are is due to your DNA and your nature, and how much of who you are is due to the nurturing, due to your experiences. We don't have a final answer on this, so we can't answer that. What's reality? But there's another question, the pragmatic question, And that's which of these mindsets is more useful in life. And that one we do have an answer for. Because according to Dweck's research, the growth mindset, right, is more helpful to us. More helpful to a virtue ethicist that's aiming to be a better person. Right? Let's bring this back to virtue ethics, which, remember, we said virtue, arete, in the ancient Greek, means excellence. Be excellent, we said, and also be excellent to each other. So, depending on what mindset you have is going to really affect virtue ethics, which is about what qualities we want to have be a part of us and what qualities we don't, right? The qualities we do want to nurture and have as a part of us are the virtues, and the qualities that we don't, we call the vices, right? This is going back. I forgot I could use this. So we have arete, which was ancient Greek for virtue, but literally means excellence. And we talked about how we have virtues and vices, right? Good qualities of a person, and I should probably spell that right, of a person, and vices, bad qualities of a person. Okay. Well, let's connect this to virtue ethics. So if you have a growth mindset, then whether you're good or bad is something that you can change, right? Whereas if you have a fixed mindset, then when you look at sort of the moral, the ultimate moral judgment on someone, and you say that they're a bad person, they have vices, well, if you have a fixed mindset, then that's something that's not going to change. They're just going to be a bad person. And if you have a growth mindset and you see a bad person, you say that's a bad person, you would also see at the same time that they could become a good person, right? It would not happen all at once, but over time, with process praise and help in sort of practicing to be a better person, they could become a good person. So this is the connection between mindset theory and virtue ethics, right? Are we fixed morally in what kind of person we are, or is it something that can change and can change dramatically? Okay. So hopefully you've gotten something out of this lecture. I think that this lecture could be really useful to a lot of students who had never thought about mindset theory and might have had more of a fixed mindset when it came to not doing well in classes or struggling. And now you have the option, since we don't know which one is right, we have the option to choose either, and we can choose one that has been found to be more useful to us in the long run of higher performance, right? Of being better, being more excellent in the long run. Okay, so I hope everyone is doing well, and as well, I'm going to set up a discussion board, and this time you only need to leave 2 comments, and I just want your thoughts about this topic. Okay, I will be looking forward to reading what you have to say.